How's it going, Dave from Comic Book Investments? So this came across my email and I found it pretty interesting. So we all know that X-Men 133, Uncanny X-Men 133, is the first solo Wolverine story. But is that actually accurate? Is that actually true? Well, from this email and from a little bit of digging myself and some research, I found out that it's not actually X-Men 133. That is not Wolverine's first solo adventure. That came out in around February of 1980. But what if I told you that there was a book that came out prior to that was actually his first solo story? That would be in a UK version, Marvel Comics UK. 1 year prior, in March of 1979, Marvel Comics UK number 335 came out with a solo Wolverine story. Now, what is Marvel Comics UK? Well, back in a long time ago, back in like the 60s, they would have a bunch of different random publishers that would basically license out the rights to Marvel Comics. It's like, hey, you have a Fantastic Four #1. Can we reprint that story? And so this new random companies would always have the rights and license them out. And they never really lasted that long, maybe like a couple years to 5 years, something like that. And they'd change the title to be like Creepy Worlds, and that'd be like Fantastic Four #1, things like that. And then they'd also have like Spider-Man, all these other different ones. But those companies never really lasted long. Then Marvel had the bright idea, is like, hey, why would we let these other companies make money? Why don't we make the money ourselves? So they opened a branch over in the UK called Marvel Comics UK. Pretty simple. And this was about 1972. That's when they started doing that. And all they would do is they would take their previously issued out comic book stories and they just reprint them. That's all it really was just reprints. But over in the UK, what was really popular was having more easy throwaway newspaper style weekly comic books. So they were bigger and than a normal comic size, but they were made on newspaper and people just read them and then throw them away. It was a different culture over there. It wasn't like how it was here in the US. So they would just reprint stories, make them bigger sized, and put them out. What happened was they ended up just like having a bunch of different random titles, and they kind of were competing with each other. So they brought on a new person, and what was once called the Mighty World of Marvel, he wanted to change it just to Marvel Comics UK and make it a more weekly and more newspaper-esque kind of thing that was more accustomed to over there. So he changed the title, and then you got Marvel Comics. That's all it's called, just Marvel Comics. And it just reprint different stories. If there was a big character, like they had the Hulk in there, and then the live-action TV show came out in the 70s, and they're like, oh, let's give him his own, magazine. They did that. So basically, Marvel Comics was just reprints. That's all they did. They just reprinted different stories. But there was this one time, which didn't happen often, where they needed to do an original story. So they contacted Marvel Comics, and they did an original story. And who did they do it of? They did Wolverine. That's right. Wolverine's first original story was actually in 1979, 1 year prior to X-Men 133. Now in this story, he just battles Hercules. It's a very small story. But another interesting thing is, who did they have on this story? They had none other than George Perez. His first inking job was on this original comic. Yep, that's right. His first inking job as George Perez was on this comic that was over in the UK. They later took that story and reprinted it in Marvel Treasury editions, which is like these massive, huge books. Like you just like two hands, you just like open it up. Massive books. Never really caught on because they're so massive, and they're more of an inconvenience now. So like whenever someone gives them to me, I'm like, I don't know how much. It's like shipping this massive box, and it doesn't fit in anything, and yeah. So they reprinted it in Marvel Treasury Edition 26 that came out in the mid of 1980, so a few months after X-Men 133. But they did color it because in Marvel Comics, the UK version, they didn't do color. They're cheaply made, very cheaply made, just so people could read them and then throw them away. So they colored it and they changed the title. It was Wolverine versus Hercules in the original version, where basically Wolverine was the main character battling Hercules, and it also had the iconic Wolverine sitting at a bar wanting to be left alone that you see in everything. I think that might have been the first time that was used, that iconic kind of scene, him sitting at a bar. Then later they changed it to Hercules or Wolverine and Hercules, and made it more of like a buddy thing. But it wasn't that the case in the original story. So that is kind of interesting. That came across my email. Someone brought it to my attention. I had no idea. I kind of like learning these weird things I've never even heard about before in my life. And then I, go down the rabbit hole doing research, trying to figure it out, learning it as I go. So this potentially could be Wolverine's actual first solo series. It did come out like 3 years prior to Wolverine limited series that they had that ran for 4 issues. And yeah, so this could be, it's actually quite rare, very hard to find. They had a lot of like printing issues over there and just like a bungled mess. At one point, they were selling 150,000 weekly editions of this. Not every week, but they're selling quite a lot. And it wasn't uncommon for things like this to be selling in the 200,000s a week. And they're also non-returnable. That's another thing. Over here in the States, like, you ever see the remainder copy they can rip off and send it back to the distributor if it doesn't sell? These are actually sold, no returns, all that kind of stuff, because people read them, threw them away. That's how they're made. Later, Marvel UK branched off into original characters and stories. That's where you get Captain Britain. You also get Psylocke, who first appears in Captain Britain number 8. And then later, just tons of other random characters and things like that. But that's kind of like the story. Now, the only thing people could say why it's not the original one, because it's Wolverine and Hercules. But the original version was Wolverine versus Hercules, making it seem like Wolverine was the protagonist. Is that the one where you're the main character? And then Hercules is the antagonist, like the side character that ruins everything and kind of pushes the story along. So that was brought to my attention. I'm looking at it. I could see the point of this is, Wolverine's first solo series or first solo comic book on its own. Again, super rare, nearly impossible to find. You're not going to find them because these were made to be thrown away. They're made to be read and is kind of tossed and really not kept, very good care of. And again, they had a lot of printing issues and a lot of issues going on around this time. And they're also switching. This is when they're switching over from Stanley personally flew down to UK and found this guy named Des Skin. And he kind of revamped everything. So that's why they're having a bunch of problems during this era when this particular one came out. And they didn't had it fully going yet. So let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. Is this actually his first solo series, Wolverine's first solo series? And did you even know about it? I definitely didn't, so I can guarantee you that most of you probably never even knew this at all. And it's quite an interesting story. Have a good day.